This is Nunhead Cemetery in the southeast of London. It was formerly known as All Saints Cemetery in Nunhead. It is listed as one of London's magnificent 7 cemeteries. The better known ones are Highgate and Brompton and so forth. Nunhead is probably the least known of the magnificent 7. On our right as we come in is this very tall obelisk to the Scottish Martyrs. On this side are some names: Thomas Muir, Thomas Fish Palmer, William Skirving, Maurice Margaret and Joseph Gerald. And nearby is an information board telling you a little bit about these 5 gentlemen and what they did. As we walk up from the main entrance, each side of us and set back are these larger memorials just on the edge of the trees now. And like many memorials that are put under trees, the inscriptions become covered with lichen and other growths, and it makes reading them very difficult. This is clear and readable, and it's the memory of Rebecca, the beloved wife of William Lewis Esquire, and he was of Southampton Place, Euston Square. She died aged 54, and then beneath that we have William Lewis. This memorial is to Henry Daniel, a mason, many years connected with the Leagate and Nunhead cemeteries. So as we look around, we'll know that many of these memorials, perhaps the ones alongside, were done by Henry Daniel, the mason. In loving memory of Ada Mary Nellie Denny, the wife of Fleet Engineer J. Theo H. Denny, Royal Navy. And she died in 1902, just 46 years old. Close to the paths here are a lot of very large monuments. Path turns right there and also goes down to the left. More memorials on the corner there. Behind the very large memorials facing the paths, the lesser memorials, lesser in size, not interest, go back behind and are rather left to revert to a wild state. There are paths through here. You can make your way through and explore it. It's rather beautiful, the way the wildlife has taken over. These here have become completely covered by creeper, but it could be pulled back and you could read the inscriptions if you wished. And this track, probably an animal track, goes on deeper into the cemetery. Just off the main path is this huge slab of granite. At the top it's marked as the family grave of C.W. Andrew, looks like of North Brixton. And then a whole list of his children and his family that have died. I see Eliza Jane, Alfred, Arthur, Eliza, Walter, Eliza, Edward. There's a whole family history here on this stone. It wants a little bit of cleaning up to see the inscription clearly, but they all have their dates. Back in the undergrowth, but lit up by the sun at the moment, is this large block with the name Tom Hood written on it. Died in 1874. Erected to his memory by a few friends and fellow workers. It looks as though he was only about 40 years old, so he died prematurely. Tom Hood. This is a war memorial to C.L.A. Newitt, the King's Own Royal Regiment, 1941, aged 35. This one is again back off the main path. Robert Frank, Bobby, the only son of R.A. and A. Beer, who was wounded on the Somme in 1916 and died back in London 1917, aged 22. Through on the far side of the cemetery, we come to the newer graves, and we can see that it's still being used. Plenty of current memorials and plenty of space for new incumbents. An inscription here tells us a little bit more about a person. Thomas Frederick Hayter, 33rd Searchlight Regiment, Royal Artillery, lately 19th Company of London Regiment, killed on active service in 1943, aged 30. And then we've got a couple of other people below that, possibly his parents. This larger one. It reads James Figgins, son of Vincent and Elizabeth Figgins of Russell Square, London, JP Middlesex, for many years alderman of the ward of Farringdon, formerly MP for Shrewsbury. There is a board here telling us of some of the famous graves in this yard. I won't try and read them all, but I'll leave them on film so you can read them for yourselves. This is the tomb of Brian and Mary Donkin. Now, Brian Donkin, there are several generations of Brian Donkins, who were very famous engineers in London during the Industrial Revolution. Huge memorial here, very elaborate. The name on the front is John Allen. A rather elaborately decorated mausoleum here. A lot of carving going on around the door. A lot of detail down the left-hand side at the top. Inside the metal gate, we can just see some empty shelves where the coffins would have originally stood. Set well back from the path and not easy to spot is this memorial stone. This is Gunner G.J. Bailey, Royal Artillery, aged 35 when he died in 1941. At the top of the slope here is this large tomb, Thomas William Wing, Justice of the Peace for Suffolk, and on the bottom part is his sister Rebecca Bates Wing. Picked out in the sunlight here is a very clear inscription. This is to George Crawley, son of the late Charles Crawley of Rotherbury House in Kent. A well detailed and well preserved carving on the side of this memorial. This is another side of it. This is the third side. And on the fourth side, is the name Frederick Augustus Schroeter. Schroeter. And there's some other information beneath that. I believe it's his wife's name underneath. This is a very magical place, very special place to come. So peaceful, and yet so full of interest. One to the Reverend Joshua Russell of Blackheath Hill, for 23 years Minister of Lewisham Road Chapel in Greenwich. This is a family tomb for the Attenborough family. On the right hand side we got George Attenborough, and underneath George Harold Attenborough. This is a large tomb. The left hand side has a lot of inscription on it. Not straightforward to read. A little easier on the end here, which tells it's to William Gover of Havering House, Blackheath. He died in 1868. And everywhere you look, there's stones that you feel you ought to walk into the undergrowth and explore. Hundreds, thousands of these monuments. This is to the beautiful memory of Gussie, Alfred Augustus Penn, the only child of Edith and Alfred Penn, who was 20 years old in 1928. And part of the same grave is this stone in front in the shape of an anchor. Our dear brave hero sailor brother Reginald Boult of HMS Iris II, who died of wounds received at Zeebrugge, 1918. He was just 21. A little further into the undergrowth, into the woods, is one to C.B.N. Biggs, Ordinary Seaman Royal Navy, HMS Renown, 1918. So many stones, so many stories, just so much to see. Here's one beside the path to William Weston, Willie. He died in 1907, aged 10 years. And his brother, Frank, who died in 1915, aged 26 years. And then the father and the mother of those two young men. Tucked back from the path is this one with the tall chimney-like column on top. Much of the inscription is covered with moss, but underneath that it will be beautifully preserved. The name I can read is Smith, surname Smith, but up here on the column is a lot of inscription underneath that green moss. Be interesting to have it cleaned one day and see what it actually says. This has a very clear inscription. Frederick Edward Raven, the husband of Kate Wallace Raven, who died in 1903, and their son, who died in 1910, aged 35, and then there is Kate. At the bottom we also have an additional Frances Gertrude Raven. Very clear inscription on that. It's remarkable how that stone hasn't attracted the lichen which the adjoining stones have. Some of the paths here through the cemetery are really only animal tracks, and I really should be armed with some cutters and secateurs to make my way through. But you can see there is a sort of track here. Probably badgers or foxes use this route. But it leads you to the stones which are further in the cemetery. Ones that are quite readable. Here's Mary, the beloved wife of Henry Carl Rogers. And Just the other side of the gap we've squeezed through, we've got Nellie Kosh, and a name underneath, Davis Kosh, covered a bit by creeper, but we could easily remove that if we wanted to read the whole inscription. We're back on one of the main paths now, and this has a group of very large monuments here. But just to the left you can go back into the undergrowth, and there are numerous other monuments in the wild there to explore. One of the tall ones in that group is dedicated to James Wells, an able minister of the New Testament, who after a pastorate of 42 years over the Baptist Church at the Surrey Tabernacle. A rather nice inscription on this one. Beneath the memorial lie the precious remains of Jane Mary Eliza, the loved and loving wife of David Cripps Preston, who sweetly fell asleep. Very nicely put. I've gone quite a way into the undergrowth of the woods here, following animal tracks, and here, just tucked away, almost unfound, is this war grave. Sapper W.J. Brimmel, Royal Engineers, 1918. And fighting my way through the undergrowth to find a path out of this overgrown section, there is another war grave. Driver G.S. Flower. This is Second World War, Royal Signals, or just post Second World War, aged 43 in 1947. And the family have added words at the bottom: far away from sorrow, toil and weeping, not dead, but only taking rest. And a little further on these almost untrodden paths, Private J.R. Middleton, 18th Battalion Canadian Infantry, 1917, aged 39. Well, this is a truly amazing graveyard. Certainly deserves to be one of the magnificent 7 in London. It's a shame it's not better known, and you should really come and see this one. It's got the large memorials beside the main paths, and yet there's plenty of opportunity to go exploring where it's been allowed to go back to nature. And some interesting inscriptions as well to find. I'd certainly recommend a visit here. Till the next time.